Hi guys, happy Monday, ready for another week. We got pretty far in the book yesterday. We're more than halfway done. It's still gonna be a little bit till we finish the book, but I think we're starting to get to like more of the action-y part of the fantasy novel. So that's kind of exciting. We've learned a lot about this world and everything up until now. So it was a lot of learning about things in this world. So hopefully we're getting close. If you remember, the last time that we read, Jacob and Emma were planning a meetup. So they were planning to meet up once like Jacob's dad and Miss Peregrine and everyone went to sleep. So that way Emma could share with Jacob some more information about Victor and just about stuff that Miss Peregrine doesn't let them talk about. So we're at a break right now in the middle of a chapter because I think what we're about to read is where they meet up. So that's where we're gonna start today. Why is this here? Okay. So we're right here at this break on page 233. Let me get comfy. Okay, here we go. Oh, you know what? I need to set my alarms. That way I don't keep you guys here forever. Because otherwise I will just read forever. Okay. It was another rainy evening in the 21st century, and by the time I reached the pub, I was thankful to just be somewhere dry. I found my dad alone, nursing a beer at the table, so I pulled up a chair and began fabricating stories about my day while toweling off my face with napkins, something I was beginning to discover about lying. The more I did it, the easier it got. He was hardly even listening. Huh, he'd say, that's interesting, and then his gaze would drift off and he'd take another swig of beer. What's up with you? I said. Are you still mad at me? Oh, no, nothing like that. He was about to explain, but waved it away. It's stupid. Dad, come on. It's just this guy who showed up a couple days ago, another birder. Someone you know? He shook his head. Never seen him before. At first I thought he was just some part-time enthusiast yahoo, but he keeps coming back to the same sites, the same nesting grounds, taking notes. He definitely knows what he's doing. Then today I saw him with a banding cage and a pair of predators, so I know he's a pro. Predators? Binoculars, real serious glass. He'd wadded up his paper placemat and re-smoothed it 3 times now, a nervous habit. It's just that I thought I had the scoop on this bird population, you know? I really wanted this book to be something special. And then this guy comes along. Jacob. It will be special, I said reassuredly. He shrugged. I don't know, hope so, but he didn't sound too certain. I knew exactly what was about to happen. It was part of this pathetic cycle my dad was caught in. He'd get really passionate about some project, talk about it nonstop for months. Then, inevitably, some tiny problem would crop up and throw sand in the gears. And instead of dealing with it, he'd let it completely overwhelm him. The next thing you know, the project would be off, and he'd be on to the next one, and the cycle would start again. He got discouraged too easily. It was the reason why he had a dozen unfinished manuscripts locked in his desk, and why the bird store he tried to open with Aunt Susie never got off the ground, and why he had a bachelor's degree in Asian languages, but had never been to Asia. He was 46 years old and still trying to find himself, still trying to prove he didn't need my mother's money. So the dad's really upset because some other birder is there observing the same stuff as him. So he's getting kind of like, well, why am I even doing this? This guy's gonna do it. He's clearly a pro. He's getting really discouraged. What he really needed was a pep talk that I didn't feel at all qualified to give. So instead, I tried to subtly change the subject. Where's the interloper staying? I asked. I thought we had the only rooms in town. I assume he's camping, my dad replied. In this weather? Where am I? There we are. It's kind of a hardcore ornithology Greek thing. Roughing it gets you closer to your subjects, both physically and psychologically. Achievement through adversity and all that. I laughed. Then why aren't you out there? I said, then immediately wished I hadn't. Same reason my book probably won't happen. There's always someone more dedicated than I am. I shifted awkwardly in my chair. I didn't mean it like that. What I meant was, shh. My dad stiffened, glancing furtively towards the door. Look quick, but don't make it obvious. He just walked in. I shielded my face with the menu and peered over the top. A scruffy-looking bearded guy stood in the doorway, stamping water from his boots. He wore a rain hat and dark glasses and what appeared to be several jackets layered on top of one another, which made him look both fat and vaguely transient. I love the homeless Santa Claus thing he's got going on, I whispered. Not an easy look to pull off, very next season. He ignored me. The man bellied up to the bar and conversations around him quieted a notch or two. Kev asked what he'd like and the man said something and Kev disappeared into the kitchen. He stared straight ahead as he waited, and a minute later Kev came back and handed the guy a doggy bag. He took it, dropped some bills on the bar, and then went to the door. Before leaving, he turned to slowly scan the room. Then, after a long moment, he left. I wonder what was in the doggy bag. "What do you order?" my dad shouted when the door had swung shut. "Couple of steaks," Kev replied. "Said he didn't care how they were cooked, so he got them 10 seconds aside rare. No complaints." People began to mutter and speculate, the volume of their conversation rising again. "Raw steak?" I said to my father. "You gotta admit, even for an ornithologist, that's a little weird." "Maybe he's a raw foodist," my dad replied. "Yeah, right. Or maybe he's tired of feasting on the blood of lambs." Dad rolled his eyes. "The man obviously has a camp stove. He probably just prefers to cook out in the open." "In the rain? Why are you defending him anyway? I thought he was your arch nemesis." "I don't expect you to understand," he said, "but it would be nice if you didn't make fun of me." And he stood up to go to the bar. A few hours later, my dad stumbled upstairs and flopped onto his bed. He was asleep instantly, ripping out monster snores. I grabbed a coat and set out to meet Emma. No sneaking necessary. The streets were deserted and so quiet you could almost hear the dew fall. Clouds stretched thinly across the sky with just enough moonlight glowing through to light my way. As I crested the ridge, a prickly feeling crept over me, and I looked around to see a man watching me from a distant outcropping. Ooh, someone's watching him. He had his hands raised to his face, and his elbows splayed out like he was looking through binoculars. Ooh, someone's watching him. The first thing I thought was, darn it, I'm caught, assuming it was one of the sheep farmers out on watch, playing detective. But if so, why wasn't he coming over to confront me? Instead, he just stood and watched, and I watched back. Finally, I figured, if I'm caught, I'm caught. Because whether I went back now or kept going, one way or another, word of my late-night excursion would circle back to my dad. So I raised my arm in a one-fingered salute and descended into the chilly fog. Coming out of the cairn, it looked like the clouds had been peeled back and the moon pumped up like big yellow balloon. So bright, I almost had to squint. So he went through the tunnel and he's on the other side right now, meeting Emma. A few minutes later, Emma came wading through the bog, apologizing and talking a mile a minute. There we go. "Sorry I'm late. It took ages for everyone to get to bed. Then on my way out, I stumbled over Hugh and Fiona snogging each other's faces off in the garden. But don't worry, they promised not to tell if I didn't." She threw her arms around my neck. "I missed you," she said. "Sorry about before." "I am too," I said, patting her back awkwardly. "So, let's talk." She pulled away. "Not here. There's a better place, a special place." "I don't know." She took my hand. "Don't be that way. You'll adore it, I promise. And when we get there, I'll tell you everything." I was pretty certain it was a plot to get me to kiss her. And had I been any older or wiser, or one of those guys for whom makeout sessions with girls were so frequent as to be of no consequence, I might have had the emotional fortitude to demand that we have our talk right then and there. But I was none of those things. Besides, there was a way she beamed at me, smiling with her whole self, and how a coy gesture like tucking her hair back could make me want to follow her, help her, and do anything she asked. I was hopelessly outmatched. "I'll go, but I'm not going to kiss her," I told myself. I repeated it like a mantra as she led me across the bog. "Do not kiss. Do not kiss." We headed for town but veered off towards the rocky beach that looked out into the lighthouse, picking our way down the steep path to the sand. Reaching the water's edge, she told me to wait and ran off to retrieve something. I stood watching the lighthouse beam wheel around and wash over everything. A million seabirds seeping into the pitted cliffs, giant rocks exposed by the low tide, a rotted skiff drowning in the sand. When Emma came back, I saw that she had changed into her swimsuit and was holding a pair of snorkel masks. Oh no, I said, no way. You might want to change to your skivvies, she said, looking doubtfully at my jeans and coat. Your outfit's all wrong for swimming. That's because I'm not going swimming. I agreed to sneak out and meet you in the middle of the night, fine. But just to talk, not to. We will talk, she insisted. Underwear in my boxers? She kicked sand at me and started to walk away, and then she turned and came back. I'm not going to attack you if that's what you're in a knit about. Don't flatter yourself. I'm not. Then quit mucking about and take off those silly trousers. And then she did attack me, wrestling me to the ground and struggling to remove my belt with one hand while rubbing my sand in my face with the other. She's rubbing sand in his face. That's funny. And, oh, I hate sand. It just gets so messy. Blah, I cried, spitting out sand. Dirty fighter, dirty fighter. I had no choice but return the favor with a fistful of my own. And pretty soon, things devolved into a no-holds-barred sand fight. When it was over, we were both laughing and trying in vain to brush it all out of our hair. That's so gross. Blech. Well, now you need a bath, so you might as well get in the water. Okay, fine. The water was shockingly cold at first. Not a great situation. But I got used to the temperature pretty quickly. We waded out past the rocks where, lashed to a depth marker, was a canoe. We clambered into it, and Emma handed me an oar, and we both started paddling, headed towards the lighthouse. The night was warm and the sea calm, and for a few minutes I lost myself in the pleasant rhythm of the oars slapping water. About 100 yards from the lighthouse, Emma stopped paddling and stepped overboard. To my amazement, she didn't slip under the waves, but stood up, submerged only to her knees. Are you on a sandbar or something? I asked. Oops, sorry, I didn't move this. Nope. She reached into the canoe, pulled out a little anchor, and dropped it. It fell about 3 feet before stopping with a metallic clang. A moment later, the lighthouse beam swept past, and I saw the hull of a ship stretching beneath us on all sides. A shipwreck? Come on, she said. We're nearly there. And bring your mask. She started walking across the wrecked boat's hull. I stepped out gingerly and followed. To anyone watching from shore, it would have looked like we were walking on water. How big is this thing anyway? I said. Massive. It's an Allied warship. Hit a friendly mine and sank right here. That's pretty crazy. She stopped. Look away from the lighthouse for a moment, she said. Let your eyes get used to the dark. So we stood facing the shore and waited as small waves slapped at our thighs. All right, now follow me and take a giant breath. She walked over to a dark hole in the ship's hull, a door from the look of it, then sat down at the edge and plunged in. This is insane, I thought, and then I strapped on the mask she'd given me and plunged in after her. I peered into the enveloping blackness with my feet to see Emma pulling herself even further down by the rungs of a ladder. I grabbed the top of it and followed, descending hand over hand until it stopped at a metal floor where she was waiting. We seemed to be in some sort of cargo hold, though it was too dark to tell much more than that. I tapped on her elbow and pointed to my mouth. I need to breathe. Oh yeah, they're just snorkeling, so they don't have like oxygen or anything right now. She patted my arm condescendingly and reached for a length of plastic tubing that hung nearby. It was connected to a pipe that ran up the ladder to the surface. Oh, that's pretty smart. She put the tube in her mouth and blew, her cheeks puffing out with the effort, and then took a breath from it and passed it to me. I sucked in a welcome lungful of air. We were 20 feet underwater inside an old shipwreck, and we were breathing. Emma pointed to a doorway in front of us, little more than a black hole in the murk. I shook my head, don't want to, but she took my hand as though I was a frightened toddler and led me toward it, bringing the tube along. We drifted through the doorway into total darkness. For a while, we just hung there, passing the breathing tube between us. There was no sound but our breaths bubbling and up and obscure thuds from deep inside the ship, pieces of the broken hull knocking in the current. If I had shut my eyes, it wouldn't have been any darker. We were like astronauts floating in a starless universe. But then a baffling and magnificent thing happened. One by one, the stars came out. Here and there, a green flash in the dark. I thought I was hallucinating. But then more lit up, and still more, until a whole constellation surged around us like a million green twinkling stars, lighting our bodies, reflecting in our masks. Emma held out a hand and flicked her wrist, but rather than producing a ball of fire, her hand glowed in a scintillating blue. Scintillating blue. The green stars pulsed around it, flashing and whirling, echoing her movements like a school of fish, which I realized is what they were. Mesmerized, I lost all track of time. We stayed there for what seemed like hours, though it was probably only a few minutes. Then I felt Emma nudge me, and we retreated through the doorway and up the ladder. And when we broke the surface again, the first thing I saw was the great bold stripe of the Milky Way painted across the heavens. And it occurred to me that together, the fish and the stars formed a complete system, coincident parts of some ancient and mysterious whole. Oops. We pulled ourselves into the hole and took off our masks. For a while, we just sat like that, half submerged, thighs touching, speechless. What were those? I said finally. We call them flashlight fish. I've never seen one before. Most people never do, she said. They hide. They're beautiful. Yes, and peculiar. Emma smiled. They are that too. And then her hand crept up to my knee, and I let it stay there because it felt warm and good in the cool water. I listened for a voice in my head telling me not to kiss her, but it had gone silent. Oh. Okay, timer went off, so I need to find a good stopping. Oh, we're almost to the end of this chapter. Okay. So they kissed. She put a hand on my chest, at once gentle and firm. I need to breathe, dummy. I laughed. Okay. She took my hands and looked at me, and I looked back. It was almost more intense than kissing, but just looking. And then she said, you should stay. Stay? I repeated. Here, with us. The reality of her words filtered through, and the tingling magic of what had just happened between us numbed out. I want to, but I don't think I can. Why not? I considered the idea, the sun, the feast, the friends, and the sameness, the perfect identical days. You can get sick of anything if you have too much of it, like all the petty luxuries my mother bought and quickly grew bored with. But Emma, there was Emma. Maybe it wasn't so strange what we could have. Maybe I could stay for a while and love her and then go home. But no, by the time I wanted to leave, it would be too late. She was a siren. I had to be strong. It's him you want, not me. I can't be him for you. She looked away, stung. That isn't why you should stay. You belong here, Jacob. I don't. I'm not like you. Yes, you are, she insisted. I'm not. I'm common, just like my grandfather. Emma shook her head. Is that what you really think? If I could do something spectacular like you, don't you think I would have noticed by now? I'm not meant to tell you this, she said, but common people can't pass through time loops. Ooh, that's interesting. I considered this for a moment, but couldn't make sense of it. There's nothing peculiar about me. I'm the most average person you'll ever meet. I doubt that very much, she replied. Abe had a rare and peculiar talent, something almost no one else could do. And then she met my eyes and said, he could see the monsters. And that's the end of chapter 8. And what a cliffhanger. He could see the monsters. Ooh, okay. So my computer is about to die, so I need to debrief for you pretty quickly. Wow. So they went into the shipwreck, went down into it, and saw all these glowing fish. And I think that Emma's just trying to convince him to stay, because then when they went back up, she said, you should stay here. And so I think she's trying to show him like how amazing their life is there, and hoping that it'll convince him to stay. And then Jacob's like, no, I can't stay here. I'm not peculiar like you guys. And she said, you are, because not normal people cannot pass through the loop. And he's gone, like you guys know, back and forth many times. He didn't know that though. So like probably his dad wouldn't be able to go there because he's a normal person. So Jacob has some type of peculiarity. All we know right now is that he can go back and forth in the loop. We don't really know what else he can do. But we also at the very end learned something really important about Grandpa Portman. We knew that something was up with Grandpa Portman, and we didn't know, we didn't have all of the answers. So now we know he could see the monsters. and we'll find out more tomorrow.